I stood center stage at Yale's Woolsey Hall, clutching a diploma that cost me 4 years of sleepless nights and black coffee. The dean was shaking my hand. The organ was blasting a triumphant hymn, and the applause was deafening. But all I could hear was the silence coming from row 4, seats A and B. They were empty. My parents had promised. They swore on my grandmother's grave they would be here. But as I looked out into the sea of proud families, the only thing occupying their reserved seats were 2 crumpled programs and a ghost of a promise. I smiled for the official camera, but my chest felt like it was caving in. I walked off stage, desperate. Maybe they were stuck in traffic on I-95. Maybe there was an accident. I pulled my phone out of my robe's hidden pocket. There was one notification. It wasn't a text saying we're close. It wasn't a missed call. It was a push notification from Bank of America. Alert, wire transfer of $24,500 processed. Available balance $12. My knees almost buckled. That money wasn't theirs. It was a joint account my grandmother set up when I was a baby, but my parents were custodians. That was my rent for New York. That was my food. That was my survival. Then, the text came through from my mother. Ava, honey, we're so sorry about the ceremony. Bella was devastated after Chad broke up with her, so we decided to take her to Cabo to cheer her up. We had to borrow the savings for the resort and flights. You're the strong one. You'll figure it out. We'll celebrate you when we get back. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen. They didn't just miss my graduation. They stole my future to pay for my sister's margaritas. I looked at the $12 balance again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just took a screenshot. If they thought I was the strong one before, they had no idea what I was about to become. You're the strong one. I stood in the parking lot behind the auditorium, stripping off my graduation robe and stuffing it into a trash bag because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. That phrase kept looping in my head. It wasn't a compliment. In the Miller household, strong was just a polite word for expendable. For as long as I can remember, I was the retirement plan, and Bella was the pet project. We were born 18 months apart, but we lived in different universes under the same roof. I was the one who learned to change a tire at 16 because my dad said it was a life skill. Bella was the one who got a brand new Jeep Wrangler for her birthday because she was too anxious to take the bus. The dynamic was subtle at first, then it became the air we breathe. When I got straight A's, I got a nod. When Bella got a C-, she got a tutor, a therapist, and a mental health weekend at a spa. My parents always framed it as logic. Ava, you have a brain, my mother would say, pressing a spatula into my hand while she went to help Bella pick out an outfit. Bella has presence. We have to invest in her differently. You don't need our help to succeed. She does. They punished me for my competence. Because I didn't cry over spilled milk, they assumed I didn't need milk at all. The joint account was supposed to be the one sacred thing. My grandmother, God rest her soul, saw through them. She set it up when I was born. She put every birthday check, every Christmas bonus, every bit of spare cash into it. For Ava's freedom, she called it. She explicitly told my parents, I heard her shouting it at them one Thanksgiving, that this money was for my start in life, not their debts, and definitely not Bella's whims. But she made the mistake of making them custodians until I turned 22, which I turned tomorrow. They'd beat the clock by 24 hours. I sat on the perb, the asphalt hot against my legs, and remembered the day I got into Yale. I ran into the kitchen, letter shaking in my hand. My dad was on the phone with a credit card company, trying to raise his limit so he could buy Bella a portfolio for her modeling career. Kona, a career that consisted mostly of taking selfies in our backyard. Gad, I got in. I had whispered. He covered the receiver. Not now, Ava. Bella is having a crisis about her headshots. That was the night I stopped asking for love and started hoarding cash. I worked 3 jobs through college. I was a barista at 5 a.m., a research assistant at noon, and a tutor until midnight. I ate instant ramen while Bella posted photos of lobster tails on Instagram. I saved every penny of that $24,500 myself, adding to what Grandma left. specifically so I could put a deposit on an apartment in Manhattan. I had a job offer at a top-tier hedge fund starting Monday. But without that deposit money, I couldn't move in. I couldn't get the keys. I was homeless with an Ivy League degree. We decided to take her to Cabo. The text message burned in my pocket. They didn't steal that money because they were broke. They stole it because they fundamentally believed I didn't need it. They thought I was a machine that ran on air and rejection. They thought I would just figure it out like I always did. But as I watched a family walk by, a father carrying his daughter's diploma like it was the Holy Grail, something inside my chest snapped. It wasn't a sad snap. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. The bridge that connected me to them. I pulled up the banking app one last time. I looked at the transaction history. Transfer to Cabo Luxury Resorts. I didn't reply to my mother. I didn't call my father. I deleted their contact photos. "You're right, Mom," I whispered to the empty parking lot. "I am the strong one, and you're going to find out exactly what happens when the strong one stops holding you up." My first day at Sterling Capital, I managed a portfolio worth $300 million. I wore a crisp navy blazer, my hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and I projected absolute, icy competence. Nobody knew that 3 hours earlier I was brushing my teeth in the sink of a 24-hour Planet Fitness in Queens, praying the security guard wouldn't notice I had slept in my Honda Civic in the back lot. That was my life for the first 6 months, the strong one's reality. Because my parents had drained my safety net to fix Bella's broken heart, I couldn't afford the first month, last month, and security deposit for a Manhattan apartment. I couldn't even afford a studio in Brooklyn. I was a ghost. I worked 18-hour days, not just to impress my boss, but because the office had air conditioning and free bagels. I was the first one in, aiming for the leftover catering from client meetings so I wouldn't have to buy dinner. I was the last one out, napping in the wellness room for 20 minutes before driving back to my car. I learned to hate the sound of my phone ringing. 2 weeks into my homelessness, while I was sitting in my car eating a $1 slice of pizza, my mother FaceTimed me. I should have answered, but the condition ran deep. "Ava, look at this sunset." She was beaming, holding a margarita the size of a fishbowl. Behind her, the Cabo Ocean sparkled. Bella popped into the frame, tanned and glowing, wearing a designer bikini that probably cost more than my car insurance. "Hey, sis," Bella chirped. "We're thinking of extending the trip another week. Mom said you wouldn't mind if we used the rest of the joint account buffer. You're making big banker money now, right? You're rich." I looked at the half-eaten pizza on my lap. I looked at the pile of dirty laundry in my backseat. "I'm working, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "Oh, don't be such a grind," she sighed. "Anyway, listen, Dad needs you to log into his IRS portal. We're trying to figure out if we can write off this trip as a medical necessity for Bella's mental health. You're the finance wizard. Work your magic, okay?" They weren't calling to ask if I had a roof over my head. They weren't calling to ask how my first week went. They were calling because they wanted me to help them commit tax fraud to fund their vacation. I should have screamed. I should have told them I was sleeping in a parking lot. But I knew what they would say. They would say, "Oh, Ava, you're always so dramatic. You'll figure it out." So I didn't scream. I logged into the portal. I filed their extension. I did exactly what a good investment does. I performed. But something in my blood turned cold that night. I stopped seeing them as my family. I started seeing them as a liability, a bad asset. And in my new world, the world of sharks and hostile takeovers, you don't nurture bad assets. You liquidate them. I stopped answering their calls unless it was an emergency. I stopped coming home for holidays, claiming work conflicts. I funneled every ounce of my rage into my career. I became the most ruthless analyst on the floor. When other associates went out for drinks, I stayed and studied property law. When they slept, I studied tax loopholes. I wasn't just working for a promotion anymore. I was building an arsenal. It took me 8 months to get an apartment. It took me 2 years to make VP. It took me 3 years to become the person who could buy and sell my parents' entire existence without blinking. They thought I was distant because I was busy. They had no idea I was just waiting for the market to crash. And the crash started on a Tuesday with a notification not from my bank, but from the county clerk's public records database. 3 years later, I wasn't just surviving, I was the market. I sat in a corner office on the 42nd floor, looking down at the ants crawling along Wall Street. I wore a tailored suit that cost more than my parents' car. My portfolio had returned 40% alpha 3 years running. I wasn't just a VP, I was the youngest partner in Sterling Capital's history. But to Robert and Linda Miller, I was still just Ava the accountant. I kept my success a carefully guarded secret. I drove a rented Ford Focus when I visited them, which was rare. I wore plain clothes. I never mentioned my bonuses. I let them believe I was just scraping by, paying off my student loans, living a boring, modest life. Why? Because I knew if they smelled blood, if they smelled money, they would feed. And I wasn't feeding them, not a single crumb. While I was building an empire, they were hemorrhaging cash. I watched it happen from a distance, like a slow-motion car crash. Bella's modeling career flopped, so she pivoted to being an influencer, which apparently required a $5,000 camera and trips to Dubai. Then she tried to launch a swimwear line, then a podcast. Each venture was funded by the bank of mom and dad. They were bleeding dry to keep her afloat, convinced that this time Bella would make it big. They were gambling on a penny stock that was destined to go to zero. A notification that changed everything didn't come from a text message. It came from my Bloomberg terminal. I was reviewing a bundle of distressed residential mortgages, toxic assets that a smaller regional bank was trying to offload cheap. It's what I did. I bought debt, stripped it, and sold it for parts. I was scrolling through the spreadsheet of foreclosures in Connecticut when a familiar address stopped my heart. 142 Oakwood Drive, my childhood home. I blinked, sipping my espresso. Surely not. They had paid off that mortgage 10 years ago. It was their pride and joy, the white shutters, the perfect lawn. I pulled up the detailed credit report. It wasn't just a mortgage, it was a massacre. They had taken out a second mortgage 3 years ago, right around the time Bella needed seed money for her swimwear, then a HELEC, home equity line of credit a year later, then massive credit card debt. They were leveraged to the hilt. The house was 90 days past due. The bank had initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings. They were drowning, and they hadn't told me. I dug deeper into the public records. Why now? Why hadn't they asked me for money yet? Then I saw the reason. They had tried to refinance, but their credit score was tanked. They were desperate. They were likely scrambling, trying to hide the shame, trying to fix it before the strong one found out they had failed. I leaned back in my Aeron chair, the letter creaking softly. The view of the Hudson River was spectacular today. A normal daughter would have panicked. A normal daughter would have called home, sobbing, offering to write a check to save the family home. I didn't feel panic. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. The market always corrects itself. My parents had spent a lifetime artificially inflating Bella's value while shorting mine. Now, the margin call was coming due. I picked up my phone. No missed calls. They were still pretending everything was fine. They were probably sitting in that living room right now, ignoring the letters from the bank, telling Bella everything was going to be okay. I didn't call them. Instead, I called my personal attorney. Get me the acquisition paperwork for the distressed asset bundle in New Haven County, I said, my voice steady. Specifically the note on 142 Oakwood. I don't want the bank to foreclose. I want to buy the debt. You want to own the debt? My lawyer asked. No, I smiled at the glass reflection of myself. I want to own the leverage. They called me on a Thursday. The tone was different this time. No small talk, no how are you, just my father's voice, tight and strangled. We need to meet, now. I agreed to meet them at a diner, halfway between the city and the suburbs. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and placed a thick manila envelope on the table. Inside was the lethal injection for their financial life, disguised as a lifeline. When they walked in, they looked like ghosts of the people who used to terrorize my self-esteem. My mother's roots were showing. She hadn't been to the salon in weeks. My father's suit was wrinkled. But despite the fear in their eyes, the arrogance was still there. It hung off them like a bad smell. They slid into the booth opposite me. They didn't order anything. "We're in a bit of a bind," my father started, refusing to make eye contact. "Cash flow issue. Temporary. The bank is being unreasonable about a few missed payments." "A few?" I asked, keeping my face blank. "Dad, pre-foreclosure starts at 90 days. You're past that." He flinched. "How do you know that?" "Public records." I lied. "I'd check up on you." My mother reached across the table, grabbing my hand. Her palms were sweaty. "Ava, listen, we need $50,000 just to catch up. Once Bella's swimwear line takes off next month, we'll pay you back with interest. We just need a bridge." I almost laughed. Bella's swimwear line was a box of bikinis in the garage that even Goodwill wouldn't take. But I nodded slowly, playing the part of the concerned, dutiful daughter. "I don't have $50,000 in cash, Mom," I said. "I'm still paying off student loans, remember?" Their faces fell. The desperation turned into anger. "So that's it?" My father snapped. "You're just going to let us lose the house? After everything we sacrificed for you? We raised you. We fed you." "I didn't say I couldn't help," I interrupted, my voice soft. I said, "I don't have cash, but I have connections." I tapped the manila envelope. "I work with a private equity fund. They buy distressed debt." I pulled some strings. "I told them you were family. They are willing to pay off the entire mortgage balance, not just the arrears, the whole thing, and stop the foreclosure immediately." My parents exchanged a look. Relief washed over them so fast it was pathetic. "But," I added, holding up a finger, "they need security. They won't just pay it. They need the deed." "The deed." My father bristled. "I'm not selling my house. It's a title transfer for security purposes," I said, using the jargon I knew would confuse them. "You sign the deed over to the holding company, Atlas Holdings, LLC. They pay the bank. You stay in the house. You live there just like you do now. Once you pay them back the 50 grand plus the principal, they transfer the deed back. It's just paperwork to satisfy the risk managers." I slid the documents across the table. They were thick, dense, and full of legal fine print. The document was actually a sale and leaseback agreement. It transferred the property to Atlas Holdings, which was 100% owned by me, in exchange for paying off the debt. It also contained a clause: tenancy is at will and can be terminated with 24 hours notice for any violation of the lease terms. "I don't know." My mother hesitated, looking at the signature line. "Okay," I said, reaching to take the papers back. "Then let the bank take it next Tuesday. They'll option it off, evict you, and ruin your credit for 7 years. Bella will have to move into a rental." That was the trigger. The thought of Bella in a rental apartment. "No," my mother said. She grabbed the pen. "We'll sign." They didn't read it. They didn't even skim it. They just saw a way out. They saw a magic eraser for their mistakes. My father signed first, pressing hard on the paper. My mother signed second. "You're a good girl, Ava," my mother said, wiping a tear. "I knew we could count on you. Tell this. Atlas Holdings, thank you." "I will," I said, tucking the signed, notarized deed into my bag. They ordered pancakes to celebrate. They laughed. They talked about how they were going to plan a huge birthday party for Bella next week at the house. Now that the stress was over, I sipped my coffee and watched them eat. They had no idea they were sitting across from the CEO of Atlas Holdings. They had no idea they had just sold me their house for the price of their debt. And they certainly had no idea that I wasn't going to wait for them to pay me back. I was just waiting for the party. The following Saturday, 142 Oakwood Drive looked like a nightclub that had vomited onto a suburban lawn. Cars were parked on the grass. Bass from a DJ booth thumped so hard the windows rattled. It was Bella's golden 24th theme party, where everyone wore gold, drank gold-flecked champagne, and pretended they weren't standing on a property that was technically insolvent 48 hours ago. I pulled up across the street. I wasn't in my rental Focus. I was in a black Escalade. Beside me was David, my personal attorney, and two large men in suits who specialized in asset recovery. I watched through the tinted window. My father was on the porch, holding a cigar, laughing with a neighbor. I could almost hear him bragging. "Oh, just a little banking mix-up. You know how it is. I sorted it out. I have people." He didn't have people. He had me, and he was about to find out the difference. "Ready, Miss Miller?" David asked, adjusting his tie. "It's Ms. Atlas today," I said cold. "Let's go." We walked up the driveway. The security guard Bella had hired, because of course she hired security, tried to stop us. "Private event," he grunted. "List?" David didn't even slow down. He handed the guard a clipboard. "We're the owners. Step aside or you'll be liable for trespassing facilitation." The guard blinked, saw the legal letterhead, and stepped back. We walked into the living room. It was packed. Bella was standing on a coffee table, holding a magnum of champagne, screaming the lyrics to a song about being rich. My mother was clapping, filming it for TikTok. I signaled the DJ. One of my asset recovery guys walked over and pulled the plug. The music died instantly with a screech. "Hey!" Bella shouted, nearly falling off the table. "What the hell?" The room went silent. All eyes turned to the door. My father pushed through the crowd, his face flushing red when he saw me. "Eva," he barked, "what are you doing here? And who are these people? You're ruining Bella's vibe." "I'm not here for the vibe, Dad," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "I'm here for an inspection." "Inspection?" My mother rushed over, looking nervous. "Ava, don't be silly. This is a party. We're celebrating. Thanks to you, everything is fixed. Now grab a drink or leave." I reached into David's briefcase and pulled out the deed they had signed 3 days ago. "Actually, Mom," I said, holding the document up, "everything is fixed for Atlas Holdings, but you have a problem. You see, you signed a residential lease agreement with Atlas. So," my father spat, "they're just some shell company. They don't care about a party." "Clause 7, Section B," David read aloud, his voice monotone. "Tenants shall not use the premises for any commercial activity, public gatherings exceeding 10 guests, or any activity that creates a nuisance for the neighborhood." "It's a birthday party," Bella shrieked from the table. "Who cares?" "The landlord cares," I said. "Call them, then," my father challenged, laughing nervously. "Call this Atlas guy. I'll tell him to go to hell. I pay the rent." I smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "You can't call him Dad," I said softly. I stepped closer, right into his personal space. "Because Atlas Holdings is me. ATLAS.E and TB, landlord and savior. I own the company. I bought your debt. I own this house. I own the roof over your head, the floor under your feet, and the mortgage you stopped paying 3 years ago." The silence was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the gold-flecked drinks. My mother's face went gray. My father's cigar fell out of his hand and rolled onto the rug. "You," he whispered, "you tricked us. I did business," I corrected, "and you just violated your lease. Clause 9, immediate termination of tenancy for material breach." I checked my watch. "The party is over, and so is your residency. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises before I have these gentlemen remove you for trespassing." I looked at Bella, who was still standing on the coffee table, mouth open. "And Bella, get your shoes off my table. You're scratching the finish." 30 minutes goes by very fast when you're panic-packing a life you can no longer afford. The guests didn't wait for an explanation. The moment the word eviction floated through the room, the friends who drank Bella's champagne evaporated like mist. Within 5 minutes, the driveway was empty except for my Escalade and their leased BMW. Inside, the house was pure chaos. My asset recovery team, professional, silent, terrifying, stood by the door with trash bags. You can't do this, Bella sobbed, shoving armfuls of designer clothes into a garbage bag. Her mascara was running down her face, rooming the gold dress. Where am I supposed to sleep? I have a brand image. Try the Motel 6 off the highway, I said, leaning against the doorframe, sipping the glass of champagne she had abandoned. Although, without a credit card, you might need cash. Hope you saved some of that Cabo money. My mother was frantic, sweeping family photos off the mantelpiece into a box. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Ava, please, she begged, her voice cracking. It's raining outside. Your father has high blood pressure. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're your parents. And I was your daughter, I said, my voice dead calm. I was your daughter when you skipped my graduation. I was your daughter when you drained my savings account to pay for a vacation. I was your daughter when you called me from the beach to ask for tax help while I was sleeping in a Honda Civic. I set the glass down. The sound was sharp against the marble coaster. You told me to figure it out. Remember, you said I was the strong one. Well, Mom, now it's your turn. Be strong. Figure it out. David checked his watch. Time's up. My father tried to stall. He stood in the hallway, holding a box of cigars and a golf trophy. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic realization that he was no longer the patriarch. He was just a tenant who didn't pay rent. You're a monster. He spat at me as the security team ushered them toward the door. We invested everything in this family. No, I corrected him, following them onto the porch. You invested everything in Bella. You treated me like an insurance policy. You thought you could cash me out whenever you got into trouble. But you forgot to read the fine print, Dad. I pointed to the driveway. Policies get canceled when you stop paying the premiums. It really was raining. A cold, miserable Connecticut drizzle that soaked into their clothes immediately. They loaded the BMW in silence. Bella was shivering, clutching her phone, probably realizing she had no Wi-Fi to post a sympathy video. My mother was weeping into a silk scarf. My father just stared at the steering wheel, unwilling to start the car, unwilling to admit it was over. I stood on the dry, covered porch, warm and untouched. Here, I said, tossing something through the open car window. It landed on my father's lap. It was a gift card. Starbucks, I said, smiling. There's $10 on it. Gratitude makes life richer, right? My father's face went purple. He started the engine, reversed out of the driveway, and peeled away, his taillights fading into the wet gloom. I watched them go. I felt clean. I walked back inside. The house was quiet. The tacky gold decorations were still up, but the energy was different. It didn't feel like their home anymore. It felt like an asset, a distressed asset that I had successfully acquired, stripped of liability, and was now ready to liquidate. I picked up my phone. I had a text from my real estate agent. We have an offer on the lot. Developers want to tear it down for condos. I looked around the living room one last time. The white shutters, the perfect fireplace, the lies. I typed back. Sell it. I want it leveled by Monday. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked to my car. I didn't look back.